Hello and welcome to this morning's presentation around the finance skills of the team, the finance team skills of the future in the Chief Value Officer webinar series. Thanks very much for coming. I can see there's a number of people coming in. So to start off with, we'd like to start with an acknowledgement of country. So we begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today and pay our respects to elders past and present. We extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. There's just a little bit of housekeeping as well. So I think a lot of people who've attended these webinars will be familiar with this, but if you'd like to submit your questions, there is the question tab. We do like to have a free-flowing conversation. If you do have any technical issues, please go to support.goto.com/webinar. And then at the end of this webinar, we will be sending out an email with presentation slides today, although we don't have a heavy presentation, link to the webinar recording and access to all the other webinars we've had in this series, plus also the contact details of our speakers today. Speaking of which, our presenters today are myself, Nick Fox. I'm partner at the CFO Advisory Division at BDO here in Sydney. I lead CFO Advisory here in Sydney. A fellow partner of mine in BDO Brisbane, Fahim, who I might quickly get you to introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, thanks everyone. Hi everyone, thanks Nick. My name is Fahim Khondaker. I lead our data and AI practice here at BDO, and I'm also a professor of practice at University of New South Wales.
Thanks very much for him. And we're very, very lucky today to have Tariq joining us, who's a keynote speaker and digital transformation expert. He's also a great thought leader. If you've seen his posts on LinkedIn, I definitely follow them all. Tariq, do you want to introduce yourself a bit more fully than I am able to?
Thank you so much, Nick. Thanks for your introduction. And hello, everyone. My name is Tariq, of course, and I have more than 20 years of experience working with various multinational corporations, including PepsiCo, ExxonMobil, and PwC. Currently, I'm leading the APAC finance transformation agenda at PepsiCo, and also I'm a keynote speaker. I give a lot of keynote speeches locally and as well as internationally as well. So really looking forward to this conversation. And yeah, over to you, Nick.
Thank you very much. So there's going to be some opportunities at the end where we'll show you where you can find Tariq and also obviously myself and Fahim. But in line with the idea here, we're talking about the finance team skills of the future. So in particular, we're looking at digital skills, but also there are some of the soft skills that we actually, as a group, we were just talking about before we came onto this webinar. So if I'm tying it back to the report we published last year with the ACCA globally and BDO around the evolution of the CFO becoming the Chief Value Officer, I thought I'd look at how finance leaders are well placed to become the Chief Value Officer. However, that doesn't mean that we necessarily, as finance team members, actually necessarily will always become the Chief Value Officer. So Tariq, how do you see the opportunity for finance professionals to become a Chief Value Officer or just adding value within an organization?
So yeah, great question, Nick. And I went through that report, which is a great provides some really good insights how finance can become a Chief Value Officer, a CFO can become a CVO or a Chief Value Officer. And to your point, should we become or do we have an opportunity? I personally believe yes, for both. We do have an opportunity, and we should be we are in that unique position. Finance is in that unique position within the organization, and the visibility that we have on how different functions are operating, different processes, how actually organization itself is capturing, creating, and delivering the value, right? So for instance, finance is probably the only function which is in a position to understand how different financial and non-financial value can be created by the business through an interplay of demand, supply planning, portfolio planning, marketing, budgets, and so on and so forth. No other function is in that position. So this gives us a very unique spot or a unique opportunity as well to become that co-pilot of business strategies, to co-pilot of that, of driving that business. So, or in other words, whether we call it a CFO or a CVO, in its very essence, we have every right and in every opportunity to get onto this one, because now the other side might not be great. We can talk about that as well later, that what happens if we don't become a CVO. So I think it's an imperative. There is no choice for finance, I would say, to be anything other than a CVO. Now, one more thing I would just really like to point out as well. See, organizations today are no longer typical raw material sourcing, doing some production, manufacturing of either products or services, value adding in that way, and then delivering it to the customer. Organizations have evolved in a very complex interaction or an interplay of humans, machines, AI, and an artificially intelligent being, and algorithms, right? Alongside with a digital network, which is actually connecting everything together. Now, finance sits at the middle of it. We are a presumed, I often say that we are a presumed data stewards of the organization, right? Anyone looking for insights generally come to finance. So that said, it creates a very unique position for the CFO at the C-suite table specifically, that she can influence the not only just the data strategy, but probably the entire digital strategy of the organization. And that's where the real value in future is going to be created. Data is the new oil. It's a cliche now. Data is the most valuable resource, right? We can all agree on that one. And I do believe, being that presumed data steward, being that unique position on that C-suite table, we are very rightly placed to grab that opportunity, whether we call it a co-pilot to the business or a chief value officer.
No, that's really great. I like that. Fahim, do you have anything to add or any comments?
Yeah.
Thoughts?
I'm a very proud accountant. So, and I want to talk about that a little bit. I think accounting gets a bit of a bad rap on what it is, and what accounting really is it gives you the knowledge to understand and run a very successful business. And I think what we're talking about in terms of stepping up to the CVO role is to literally take that knowledge of understanding how the business is operating and how to run it and influence it, and stepping up into the role to bring that knowledge to the table that Tariq was talking about, right? So I think it's really, really important we go back to some of the basics of the knowledge we sit on as finance professionals and leverage that to create value for the company. And value will almost always, in some way, shape, or form, ultimately link to creating money, or increasing profit, or saving costs, right? Like increasing revenue or saving costs in some way, shape, or form. Either long-term or short-term, whichever way. And I think it's the finance professionals who are best placed to understand those drivers and give advice at a team level. And as Tariq said, organizations are complex, so decisions are quite complex. It's not a single-faceted decision maker, but I think the finance professional definitely has a very important role to play in a collective decision-making environment. And you could even argue that it could step up to a form of leadership. Like, you don't have to lead from the front and make the decision. You can lead by supporting even, but I think there's a really important step change that needs to happen. And it's really, really important we do that. And we're seeing that. So I mentioned earlier, I'm a professor at UNSW, and we've recognized this in our accounting enrollment. So across Australia, every university, enrollments in accounting programs have been decreasing in the last few years. And one of the things we're doing is pivoting the accounting degree, and we're actually transforming our entire accounting degree to focus on this element of it, of just this idea of commercial acumen and bringing your accounting knowledge and applying it to create value. And
sorry, maybe I'll just add one more point on what Fahim, maybe a quick build, and such a great point, Fahim, when you talk about how we are reshaping and it's so great to know that how we are reshaping the accounting and the way you explain it. I mean, that's really, and that's the core, right? I mean, we do need to, at the end of the day, have those functional skill set to be able to then build on that and create value for the business. On that point, now value today is not just financial anymore, right? To your point, Fahim, and that's where we need to build people's skills, where we need to build the accounting or the commercial acumen of the new new, not even new, like I mean even the for us also, right? There are so many new areas, things like sustainability, right? It's a new area for every one of us. Now world is moving towards from that single bottom line, which used to be revenues, or which used to be a profit, to a triple bottom line, right? People, profit, and planet. So sustainability and ESG matrices, they are all becoming so relevant. And I do believe, again, building on that point, Fahim mentioned that we are placed at such a great position within the organization to actually create value for, because we have that functional skill set, and we also have that commercial acumen that we can all link together. So it's all about bringing both financial and non-financial value.
I think that's really important, and I think you know, the next thing I wanted to talk about was the skill sets that finance leaders will need going into the future. And I just have a little story that I remember. So my wife's grandfather, who unfortunately passed away a couple of years ago, but he passed away at 98. He is a Kiwi, or was a Kiwi. He was the youngest chartered accountant in New Zealand, and then passed away as the oldest chartered accountant in New Zealand. That's the story the family says. But anyway, he got his chartered, I think it was at 18, quite early, back in the 30s. His skills, it was amazing watching him. He could add down a line of numbers because that was the skill set he needed at the time. He would have created ledgers in paper. Like, this is stuff that I think even us growing up in our degrees wouldn't even have thought about not using a program. So to that point, the skill sets going forward, you know, he would have known how to do that. However, the data analytics that were available to him would not have been anything near what's available to us nowadays. So I think there's a really interesting piece here about what are the skill sets we need. I think he would have some really amazing skills that sometimes I think I'd love to see in our juniors in terms of debits and credits, etc. He would have been able to roll off journals in his mind. But now the volumes and the data sets are coming through, and to Tariq's point, in terms of sustainability reporting, etc., you know, that information being captured and is going to be really critical. So that was a long way of asking, what do you think the skill sets are that finance teams need?
Yeah, there's so much to say. I'll set a bit of, we've given this a bit of thought, so I'll speak to how we thought about it in what we teach students at UNSW, right? Yeah. And then we can go from there. And Tariq, you can add a lot more, I'm sure, from a practical organizational perspective. But what we actually came down to, like, this, a plethora of information, there's a plethora of tools, there's so much to get your head around. But if you could just step back to understanding the why as a starting point, so you have a North Star to aim towards. And then the second bit being, how do you take people along on that journey as well? Those two are very fundamental pillars to work within. Okay, so understanding why you're doing this. If you're doing a transaction, or you're doing I don't know, if you're explaining depreciation to someone, why, what is the purpose of depreciation, right? So being able to articulate that skill, I think we're finding that was a bit of a gap in even what we teach. So it's no one's fault that we've got a bit of a gap in that skill set on the whole. It's because we were never taught it, right? And in fact, just before this webinar, the three of us were talking earlier, and Tariq said, for him, some of these things we just figure out through experience. We never get taught it, right? So I'm really glad that we can have this conversation today, and hopefully it benefits some people. In that, yeah, so that notion of why would be really important. And then the second bit of taking people along the journey. And I'll pause there, but there are other things, obviously, about technical knowledge of what the subject matter of you need to know your baseline accounting, the skills of being able to use the latest and greatest software and tools that are at your disposal and leverage it. But ultimately, it's based on the why, and it's to bring people along on the journey. Those are probably the two fundamental things for me.
So true, Fahim, and totally resonate with that. Again, starting with a why is so relevant, specifically in the world which is bombarded with technology, with AI, with so many. We are spoiled for options at the moment, right? So starting with why is so important. Funny enough, I was actually writing an article today, and one of the points, just a sneak peek, one of the points I talked about was actually starting with this why. That think about what we don't teach and what we need to learn as well as finance leaders is why are we going for technology, for instance, right? We talk so much about technology. Why are we even going for technology? What is the business value that is being generated through our actions? If there is no business value, if we are not solving a problem, then we need to really step back and, to your point, Fahim, and think about why are we even doing it, right? So this is a very important skill set, and I totally resonate with that. On building on what Fahim referred to as and I generally go back and talk a lot about digital and technology because that's something of an area which you can probably tell I'm a bit passionate about. So how I mentioned around organizations have evolved. We are now becoming a complex interplay of data, algorithms, digital networks, and so on and so forth. Now, what has happened actually? Effectively, we eventually will have, or we already are being partnered with a new coworker. That new coworker is an artificially intelligent being, right? And somehow we need to coexist with that. And that's true for finance, that's true for anyone outside of finance as well, but more importantly for finance, because as I mentioned earlier, we are in such a central piece of this puzzle. Now we need to coexist in a way that this artificial intelligence becomes an augmentation of who we are, right? That's where we will unlock the real value of technology, whether it's through algorithm or whether it's any other way. So to do that, I generally refer to as three main skill set that any finance leader needs to build, right? Apart from, of course, all other core skills that we have. Firstly is around having a digital mindset. And Fahim alluded to it as well. Digital mindset is all about, and it's in fact, let me tell you what it is not about. It is not about knowing how to code or knowing how to suddenly create AI products, right? It is simply understanding the connection between the data, algorithm, and people, and how you can actually use that connection to create value for the business or solve a business problem, right? Very simple, and I think that's what it is all about. Secondly, as finance, I do believe what we need to be very aware of, and I believe this is again, and naturally some of us might be inclined towards this second skill set I'm talking about, because this is how many of our finance associates are programmed as well, is about understanding and creating an awareness of responsible and ethical AI or technology practices, right? World is moving at a much faster pace than those regulations or those ethical considerations are coming into play. Finance will play a very big role in that, a massively big role in that. Again, being again coming back to that central point of being that data steward, being that steward of the financial steward of the organization. So that is another one. And last, which pretty much encompasses everything in my view, and if there is one skill that I would encourage the audience, and I always encourage everyone to build, is to have a continuous learning mindset. acknowledge the fact that there is no skill in the world that you cannot learn, or you cannot grow your mind to learn. So I guess that's what I would probably try to summarize a bit more. And if you have anything else to add.
I think that's a really good point. And I've got a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old, and to that point, we've been trying to teach my 6-year-old empathy, which those parents out there might find it, that's a challenge. But we've been telling her that the 3-year-old has a little L plate on. And then we realized that actually she's got an L plate on, so does the 6-year-old, but so did myself and my wife. And then my mother was over and she said, I've got an L plate as well. So we're all still learning. I think that's just,
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's every day that you learn something new. And then that's that continuous mindset, that continuous learning. I think that's really key there. And I really like when you were talking about the why.
I was just going to say, with the L plates, one of the beauty of that L plate mindset is it actually frees you up to make a mistake. So because you're learning, right? So you go, okay, cool, I've made a mistake in that moment, and I just move forward to the next one, right? I think Roger Federer gave a graduation speech a couple of months ago, and he said, hey, I won 80% of my matches. So I'm considered as one of the better players in tennis, right? But I only won 50% of my points. Like, he's only won 54% of his points, right? So he's saying, look, you are going to make mistakes. You're going to lose 1 in 2 almost all the time. And the learning mindset actually frees you up. And I think that's a liberating thing to be very mindful of. So yeah, I don't think we can underestimate that.
So true. I mean, learning how to fail and acknowledging how that you will fail, because there is a point. So for instance, the guy known as the magician of Menlo Park, Thomas Edison, before inventing the light bulb, he failed 3,000 times, 3,000 different products, right? And he says that I have not failed 10,000 times. I have successfully found 10,000 ways it will not work.
Yeah, and Tariq, it's great you use the word fail, because Nick and I talked about this in our previous webinar, where we talked about finance functions sometimes, unfortunately, are in an environment where they're almost not allowed to fail, right? They're almost, because you've got the finances of the company you can't fail. So I think creating opportunities to experiment and creating guardrails and trialing things is another skill that finance professionals will have to start to develop. And the cool thing about the digital tools that are at our disposal now is we can model those sorts of scenarios and implications at far greater levels of accuracy than we could ever do, right? And far greater speed as well. The challenge, I will say, though, with all of that information that's out there, a former colleague of mine, he used to say this really nice. His name was Greg Campbell. He said, you can't drink from a fire hydrant, right? There's just so much information out there that sometimes we can get overwhelmed. So being comfortable, to your point about a digital mindset, Tariq, like just being comfortable to step back or take a bite-sized piece and try something, as opposed to getting overwhelmed and trying everything and getting caught up into the detail of, oh, let me just do analysis for analysis, and then you get analysis paralysis, and you just have dashboard after dashboard after dashboard and all these analytics, and you don't actually make a decision and you don't act.
Yep.
That can be problematic as well. So having that skill to discern and take action and being comfortable to take action is another skill that I think finance professionals have to be able to develop.
I love this, Fahim, when you say experimentation and stepping back and not taking on everything. I do believe building, and as a leaders, right, as finance leaders, that is what we can encourage with our teams. I truly believe that, creating that psychologically safe space where people can actually bring out their ideas, where people feel safe to fail as long as there is something to learn. Because again, we cannot avoid that, right? I mean, this is not how it's going to be. And then again, being overwhelmed with so much, right? It makes this very difficult. You rightly pointed out, Fahim, and mm, that's how it works for me personally as well, right? I mean, just stepping back a little bit, following that 80-20 principle, it has never it has that principle has never failed me.
Yeah.
So I mean, 20% of the things generally cover 80% of what we work, right? And what we work on. And that's so true. That happens so many times, in whether we are talking about forecast, whether we are talking about rolling up our plans and everything. Things keep on changing. So you need to be comfortable with that ambiguity. So all these, this is a whole lot of skills. Again, now it's an overwhelm of skill set that everyone
Yeah.
needs to build. Now I need to start. But again, there is nothing to worry about. You don't have to do everything in 6 months, right? This is a
Yeah.
lifelong journey, right? You
Yeah.
will learn something, you will then go back to something. I did a data science. I was too much into this and very excited about this. So personally, I did a data science certification a few years back, right? I started doing coding and algorithm, but down the road, after doing a couple of years, around a year and a half, I realized, okay, this is probably not something for me, right? I might to go a step back a little bit and look at more holistic picture, because I think we need more people who can actually help use that technology and put it in practice to generate value, as opposed to keep on creating technology. So I stepped back, and then I moved into a similar but a slightly different pivot, which is more around digital transformation and the leadership side of the transformation part. So
Yeah.
again, this will keep on happening throughout your life, and that's what we need to make sure, that we are not taken back by the fact that, oh, if nothing, if anything, if you learn something, it makes you wiser, right? So if you are wiser than yesterday, I mean,
Yeah.
it's fine. There's nothing to worry about. It's a win.
Nick, can I say something in the negative then, like as well? Like, and it's an interesting one to just play. So we talked about enabling and experimenting, right? I think one of the things finance teams in many organizations, they have this reputation as the CFO is the person who just says no, right? Like they basically, you go to them and they say, no, that's not in the budget, therefore you can't do it, or that sort of concept. And that is unfortunately a reality in many organizations, right? Or the finance team is very transactional. It's all about, did you do your travel expenses right? Did you put the purchase orders in? That sort of stuff is the conversation. I think to become a chief value officer, that one of the things that finance teams will have to do more of is put themselves in the shoes of the person they're supporting and work out how they can enable the objectives of that person. And that's going to become about working hard to enable that, finding ways to enable what they want to do. Now, obviously, the finance professional has the rules and regulations and the guidelines and the budget to operate and keep everyone, be the sanity check, because you can't just let everyone do what they want and then we all go insolvent and basically have to wind up in a couple of months. But still, the mindset has to be, like Tariq talked about, the digital mindset. I think an enabling mindset with guardrails is probably another skill that finance functions will have to start creating.
So true. Yeah, I agree. I agree. And you are right when you say, at the end of the day, there is a lot that finance does and will continue to do from being that stewards, right? Because at the end of the day, having control, and one of the skills I talked about is also around having that responsible ethical practices, not making sure that there is less and less, because again, it will impact our numbers, right? If there's a bias in forecast, I mean, towards the positive side or the negative side, it will impact our numbers. So that requires a digital mindset and everything. So and that's so true. We need to have that enabling and co-pilot sort of a mindset, where we see that this, at the end of the day, and going back to your point, Fahim, starting with that why are we doing this, right? And then co-creating those solutions with our business partners. So the future is about collaborating and co-creating, right? As opposed to doing something in our Excel sheets and then presenting it and saying, oh, this is what it looks like. It's start from the beginning with your business partners, right? It's And to be very honest, it requires a lot of courage, right? It's not something that is going to happen overnight. We, at the end of the day, do feel like we have information, we have numbers, so that's our bread and butter, so that's something is in our control. And when people don't like when there is a lack of control on numbers and democratization of data, and all that is going to happen, right? With technology specifically, democratization of data, democratization of information is going to happen. So co-creating and that enabling mindset, I 100% agree with that thing.
I think that was a really interesting conversation, and it got me thinking around, is there a place for finance teams to actually, whilst we want to have a digital mindset, to actually get into data processing, into basic levels, journal entries and things like that. When I go back, think about my wife's grandfather, understanding how he would have operated. And I say this in the sense of, recently we had the CrowdStrike issue. We've had Optus go down, and I was in my local cafe speaking to them when Optus went down and we couldn't tap our cards there. And I said, well, have you ever thought about just having a backup, one of the old credit card things that you just put in and do the paper? And they looked at me like I had two heads. But I thought, well, right now you can't accept payment from me unless I had cash. And at the time I didn't have cash, and I had my 6-year-old who's trying to learn empathy, who wanted a hot chocolate. That was a customer who wanted something. So if they'd had the redundant systems or those systems in place, because I think where I'm going with this is effectively, we've talked about why, we're talking about where we're going. What are we actually trying to achieve? For that cafe, it's continuing operating in the moment. So what are those skill sets maybe that build on the base?
So I think, Nick, there's probably 2 points to that, right? Firstly, I'll deal with the redundant system issue. I think you simply have to, you simply have to adjust for probability of that occurring, weigh up the cost benefit, and then make an investment accordingly, right? So that's a pretty simple commercial concept, and you just work out, look, how often is this likely to happen? How much money are we prepared to invest for that probability? And just work through that damage, right? But the bigger point I think you're getting to is, and it's even more scary with AI now, with generative AI in particular, is how much understanding do we have of the tools and information that's available to us, right? So Tariq gave the example that he did a data science course to understand and while he didn't go ahead and become a data scientist, it's given him a lot more understanding of the tools he now advocates for, right? I did something similar. While I'm not a data scientist or a data engineer or a data analyst, I have a very good, strong appreciation of how those tools work so that I can do my work. In a more simple example, I think we can all agree we want to teach our kids mathematics, even though we know in real life, the moment they're going to do anything with 3 digits or more, they're going to use a calculator. We still want to teach them the fundamentals of mathematics. So I think there's a baseline level of understanding of everything we're going to use as a tool, because that will then keep us in check of the why and the purpose and the goal that we're trying to achieve, and know that we can use the right tool. Now, we don't have, I think sometimes we get into this trap of going a little bit too far and trying to understand the tool a bit too much, more than we need. But as Tariq said, there's no such thing as a wrong answer if you're continuously learning, right? So you spend some time, learn something new. You may not use it, but at least you've learned about it. And just working through that process. So I think that's a key bit for me. A colleague of mine says this line: with generative AI, you want to be at a stage where you are telling it's not telling you, right? So you want to have a level of control of knowledge, from a knowledge perspective, of what it is doing to generate an answer, so you can evaluate the answer.
So true, Fahim, and I love when you talk about the depth of how much we go in, and you refer to that data science thing. I actually went down the road where I was creating algorithms. So I create an algorithm of because there is so much open source available. So I created an algorithm using a lot of open source code snippets to detect anomalous transaction and everything. And I was very proud that yes, I did that. And then I realized that there are already so many out there. So this is not something new that I have done. But again, but that made me wiser, one wiser than one day wiser than I was the day before, right? So I learned something. And building to that point around, you don't have to become a data scientist, you don't have to become a coding expert, right? I mean, that is not in a way expected, or actually it might to an extent be counterintuitive for most of us, because by the time you will understand and learn data science or something like that, the technology will change. You will have to keep updating yourself with that technology while you are being at the same time trying to deliver value to the business through your leadership also, right? So what is that sweet spot where you end up doing that? There is this very good book, I generally recommend to a lot of people who are interested in this subject around digital mindset by Sidal Nile and Paul Leonardi. They are two Harvard professors. So what they call it, a 30, there's a framework of 30%, a rule of 30% of language learning. So if I'm to learn a language and get a mastery and perfection in that language, I need to know around 10,000 words of vocabulary. But if I want to converse in a reasonably good way, in a reasonable way, like I'm doing right now, English is not my first language, you need to know only only 3,000 words. I probably know only 1,000, by the way. But again, this to that impact, that's what you need for your digital literacy as well. You don't need to know everything, that how every technology is working. You just need to understand. To that point, Fahim actually alluded to that point as well, that people who have actually built these systems, generative AI, which we are looking as if it's going to reshape and revolutionize the entire world right away, they don't know how they are working, because they get so complex at a certain point in time. That deep neural network becomes so complex that us human beings are not able to understand how it's working. It was by chance that they realized that it can answer an arithmetic question, and then they decided to release it. So this is where we need to, again, I'll go back to that same thought of knowing enough, having that enough digital literacy where you are able to connect the output of data and algorithm to solve your business problem. At the end of the day, it has to be, how is it creating? You need to ask, how is it creating, and how can I create efficiency, right? What are the tools available out there? What are the technologies available out there that can be used to do that? I need to do so. For instance, if we wanna improve our processes, right? Unless you know that there is an AI application called process mining and task mining that can enable you to optimize processes in a much more faster way and much more efficient way, you would probably get stuck to the old way of interviewing and doing it that subjective and error prone way, right? So it's all about just understanding. It's not about just going about to Fahim's point, going deep into it and then becoming a data scientist or something like that.
Tariq, you've just reminded me of something. There's actually a hack to get around this as well. The moment you're doing something that just seems too hard, just pause and ask yourself, is there a better way to do this? And hell, get on Google, or get onto generative AI and ChatGPT and say, hey, I'm trying to do this. What are the best ways to do this? And I can almost guarantee you there's something out there that exists to make it easy. So if you've never heard of process mining before, like Tariq just mentioned, but you are doing a process that feels laborious and really hard and long, and you just ask yourself, is there a better way to do this? I can promise you Google will tell you there's this concept called process mining, and there'll be a YouTube video that'll explain what it is, and you'll be able to go and buy it. It's just having the mindset to go, hey, hold on, I'm spinning my wheels here. There must be a better way to do this. So in my team at work, I've told my team, so I've got a team of data scientists and data engineers, and sometimes we just get down rabbit holes and get really caught up and excited about what we're building, right? And I told my team, you've got 4 hours to spin your wheels, okay, at most. At the 4-hour mark, I want you to stop no matter what you're doing. I want you to pause and just reaffirm that you need to keep doing it this way, because otherwise, before you know it, 4 hours becomes 5 days. And we've just spent 5 days building some really clever code, which we then, like, it's good, but it's not what we needed for 5 days of effort, right? So that hack is a really handy way that I check myself quite often. So wanted to just share that.
No, I love this. I love this, Fahim. I love it.
I'm going to borrow that one. We've actually got a question. So, is AI being overplayed at the moment? I think that's in line with all the all the comments that are coming through right now. So, is AI being overplayed at the moment? Do we think it's?
Tariq, I'll let you answer it.
Yeah, sure. One, in simple words, yes. I know. I mean, a lot of people, again.
I'm going to disagree in 2 minutes, but I'll let him speak.
No, so there's a bit context behind why I'm saying yes, right? I mean, and we were talking about that as well, Fahim, that how we are divided in a world which is like, yes or no, right? Either it will do it or it will not do it. AI is, and again, my talks and everything I do is based out of digital, right? I talk a lot about AI transformation, how it's going to happen, right? That's where I research a lot as well. The point that I'm trying to make is that the way we are looking at AI today is a bit of an overhype, considering the fact that yes, I mean, when we look at generative AI, we say it's going to create trillions of economic value and this and that. Yes, it makes sense if everything works in a way it should work. While in real life, in reality, that's not how it is happening, right? A lot of people and a lot of organizations are still struggling with a huge technological debt, disparate systems, Excel sheets, manual processes, right? AI and I'm an optimist, and I believe in AI, right? I mean, don't take me wrong. I believe in AI, and I truly believe that this is a general purpose, one of the most powerful general purpose technology ever built, right? So this is going to revolutionize the way we do work. But I believe we need to step back a little bit, and especially at this point where we are having organizations are actually in a FOMO, and there are a number of organizations out there who just want to get onto the AI bandwagon, whether they have a use case or not. This is creating. This is all this is doing is adding to what we call that pilot purgatory, right? Where pilot project gets created and remains undead forever, or adding to your technological debt. What we need to do is to step back and have a look at, again, going back to that point around why do we need AI, right? Is there and why do we need AI? And then secondly, understand what AI can and cannot do for you, right? And I do believe that today we need to educate ourselves more around what AI cannot do. Gen AI is a great technology. But it is still at its very, very beta stage, or a very early stages. And it's a small technology in the bigger scheme of AI, right? There is so much of AI out there. Today, unfortunately, what has happened through the popular media, pop media, is that when we talk about AI, people think ChatGPT, right? Great on from their business point of view, but that's what people think about, right? AI has been there for last 50-60 years. Yes, we had an AI winter where nothing was happening for AI, but over the last decade at least, there are so many use cases out there of how AI is actually enabling, as I mentioned, process mining, transaction processing. Then on top of it, those generative AI chatbot tools that are enabling customer service, and so on and so forth. So use case predictive maintenance, use cases are unlimited. We will be short of use cases if we will look at it that way, right? So I guess it's an hype from a point of view of how we are just looking at the technology piece and ignoring the leadership problem or the challenge that it brings from solving the real world business problems or solving the real world issues.
I totally disagree. No,
Yes,
I agree with lots of things Tariq just said there. So I'll just say a couple of things. AI is currently, Tariq's right. Anyone who refers to AI is actually referring to generative AI, unfortunately, in the public domain. So much so that in my team, we now refer to machine learning and AI, knowing that AI is generative AI and machine learning is what has been around for the last decade, right? We don't even refer to that as AI anymore, unfortunately. So where it is being overhyped is the fact that, as Tariq said, it's at its infancy, but you wouldn't believe that if you listen to the media, right? Like, or if you listen to the tech companies. It's being sold to us as it's so great already, and it is, but it is probably, who knows, 10% of the way of what it's telling us it'll get to, like, you know what I mean? So there's still risk associated with whether it'll ever get to what it's promising, right? And we will have to wait, and the tech companies will have to raise funds from Silicon Valley, and they'll play, and they'll hopefully get there, right? And there's tons of dollars going into it. I think Google spent over $100 billion on theirs. Amazon's throwing money at it. Microsoft's throwing tons of money at it. So tons of money is going into it. Nvidia's share price is going up, and we can see that there's a lot of money involved. And usually when there's a lot of money involved, the smartest and brightest people in the world, who are the deep coders and data scientists, are going to spend a lot of time on it. And hopefully, I have lots of faith in them that they will generate something close to what we are promising it to do. So in that sense, it is a little hyped in that it's not a true representation of where it's at. Where it is underhyped, though, is there's still far too many organizations who aren't engaging with what we have now. So they're not planning for it. They're not doing the leadership planning of what does this mean for my business, okay? And where could it impact my business? If it lives up to the hype, or even if it doesn't, if it gets 50% of the way there, or even if it stays where it is today, how could I use it to create value? Because if I don't do it, my competitors will. And if my competitors do, that means my business will lose market share, and it might even mean that I'm not financially sustainable anymore. So there is an element of that. And then going back earlier to our whole concept of experimentation and all of that, if we can start with the why, get the plan right, and then create an environment where people can experiment, I think the wise journey at the moment, if you've got the funding and finances appropriate for your organization, would be to go on this journey of AI growth with it as it stands. So knowing full well it's not fully ready yet, so allocating the appropriate amount of resourcing, funding, and planning time and intellectual time to it, so that your organization goes with this journey and stays in touch with the level that you need to stay in touch with. And in that context, I think it is underhyped, because I think a lot of people are just listening to the hype, coming to their organization saying, hey, we're going to implement AI, and then they're just buying some licenses on some products, and they're just rolling it out without much planning or thinking and measuring whether it's beneficial or not. So I think getting that balance right is going to be quite key.
I think that's a really good. Oh,
sorry, I was just going to bring it back to the finance professional as an individual as well. We talked today about all the skills a finance professional needs to have. The beauty of Tariq mentioned AI as a co-worker. If you take that mindset as a very intelligent co-worker, I think for every finance professional can become a better finance professional if they bounce ideas off an AI, general purpose ChatGPT, and say, hey, I'm about to communicate this message. What are better ways to do it? I'm about to meet the head of marketing with their finance numbers this month. What's the best way to convey that message? Or what are some of the things you're seeing from these numbers? And I think treating it like a colleague in that sense, we can all improve as financial professionals.
I think that's a really good way. I mean, we've got about 10 minutes left, and so I thought it'd be really good to sort of start bringing this together and thinking about where do people start in this journey. So there are going to be people on this webinar who are already along the way. What are the skills that they need for the finance team of the future? And again, we think about the why. I think that's a really good one to start with. I'm going to jump in and use my advantage as being chair to say something first. But I think the thing that I would actually do is think about that L plate. And it's not only your own L plate, it's your whole team having an L plate, because that's giving them permission to fail as well, to go along that journey. So that's kind of if I was thinking about the one thing that I would be doing as a finance leader or a finance person, thinking from that perspective. So Tariq, what would you take away? What's your number one thing that finance leaders or team members can take away on this journey to upskill themselves for the future?
No, great point, Nick. And I might just add around again to that point of continuous learning mindset that we all need, and giving ourselves, to your point, permission to fail, because we will. And we don't have to go all in, right? Instead, start small, right? Go with the very basics of how technology is operating today. Build from there, 1 day, half-day trainings, or just go to conferences or events or seminars that are happening in this space to just get a bit of an idea, and don't get overwhelmed. Filter the information. So I recently I did a project where I was the intent was to upskill the finance team. The working principle behind that, the thinking that I had, was how do we distill the enough information in a way, and the trainings in a way, that people are able to find relevant content. So think about what's relevant to you. What's the relevant content? What are those things, those small things that you can start with, and then you will have an opportunity to build on it at any given point in time, right? And underlying everything, I would say there is one mindset shift that we need to have as finance leaders and business leaders. Many of finance leaders will be the business leaders as well. So that is about ability to learn, unlearn, and relearn, right? Be ready to learn new skill, unlearn what you know today, right? It's very hard to let go of that, do that, and relearn things, right? Because you will keep on relearning, right? If I'm thinking about AI, I'll need to keep relearning about AI. It's not just that I will do a training course and then that's it, I'm done. That's a tick in a box, right? I need to keep relearning in that. So that's what I would say. If there is one thing, one takeaway, that will be mine.
Fahim, do you have a takeaway?
I had time to think.
Where can you start?
I had time to think, so I wrote 3. So first one, I really like that enabling mindset discussion we were having. Like, as a finance professional, we have to enable others, and I think doing that more, which then kind of links quite nicely to not operate in silos. Like, finance has this amazing privilege of understanding the end-to-end connection, so precedence and dependence, and like if you make a decision here, that has a flow and impact there. And finance can be the glue that educates the organization on that at a high level. So that's quite important. And then the simple one, which kind of is probably linked to your theme of learning and continuous learning. I presented at some conference a couple of years ago, and I gave a bit of advice there that someone else gave me, and then I saw someone shared it on LinkedIn 12 months later that, oh, thanks Fahim for that advice, I've done it since, and I was so proud. 30 minutes a week. Just put 30 minutes a week aside from your busy schedule to learn something, or to just focus on yourself, right? To learn. And I think just carving out some time is really, really important. I think we're all very busy, and we all come in and get even busier every day, and we just don't find the time for ourselves. So put aside at least 30 minutes a week as a starting point.
I really like that one, and I'm gonna add one, and it ties in with what Tariq was saying as well from that perspective. Is if you're going to start somewhere, start small. So, and build incremental wins. That's, you know, I look at it. If you go in and try and do the big bang or try and boil the ocean,
Yep.
you're kind of setting yourself up for failure, especially because you've got a day job. That you need to achieve. And as finance team members, we sometimes forget. Some of the finance teams that I go and work with, we provide them with recommendations.
Yeah.
They want to get started immediately.
Yeah.
And I keep on reminding them, well, wait a minute, you've still got to do all the things that you're doing in your day to actually get to the, you know, that's your ticket to play.
Yeah. And it's not just small. Yeah, and it's not just small. Can I just add, do something fun as well? Like make the first one enjoyable. Like I was listening to Serena Williams' former tennis coach, and he was asking like, hey, if children come to learn tennis, what do you teach them? And they said the first like 12 months, all I make sure is the kids have fun on the court. Because if they have fun, they'll come back when it gets hard. Right. So do something fun. Like don't learn something super challenging and boring and something. Like do something you'll enjoy and then learn that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I love, sorry, go ahead.
Don't do something as a grind.
Yeah, exactly. And I love that part when you say Fahim 30 about the 30 minutes. So that's where it is, right? I mean, you need to be consistent, right? Consistent small actions every single day, no matter how small they are, will eventually not just expand you, not just grow your mind, it will open up new opportunities for you. You might not see that right away, but over a period of time, you will realize that how many opportunities do come to you, not just from financial point of view or from jobs point of view or career point, but as a person, as a developed person point of view as well, right? I mean, so be consistent. I think that's what my last point would be.
That's a really good one too. So apologies to everyone when I said just one each. So we all came out with 2 or 3, but you know.
We are very excited.
So we are nearing the end of this webinar. So I think what we'd like to do is if you'd like more information or more insights from BDO, you can please subscribe. And then thank you very much to our panelists today. So Fahim and Tariq. And Tariq, where can people find you? What are you up to?
I'm very active on LinkedIn, so you can always find me if you search my name. This is the picture you will see, so you can always find me there. And I mean, if you DM me there, I mean, message me, I generally respond much more quickly. My email is there. You can reach out to me through that email or this website. I have a small website as well, tariqmunir.me. It's not very digitally savvy at the moment. I'm still working on it. but yeah, still please please you can reach out. LinkedIn is the best way to reach out, to be honest.
That's great. And if you want to find either myself or for him, obviously we're at BDO, and those are our email addresses. So I'd like to thank both of you for joining us today to talk around the Chief Value Officer and basically the future skills that finance teams will need. And so looking forward to more discussions in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Fahim. Okay. I really enjoyed our conversation.